Hi everyone, I hope life is treating you kindly. I'm Lubomira and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to all my crafty friends new and returning. I always look forward to this time of the week when we get together for some crafting fun. Now that you're here, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. By hitting that little bell, you'll get notified every time I post something new and you won't miss out on any of the crafty goodness. I apologize for not having a video up last week, but my computer was acting up and honestly, I'm not sure what happened. The hubby stepped in and to make a long story short, he basically gutted my computer and installed a bunch of new things. I have a new power supply, graphics card, and more RAM. All of these things mean nothing to me since I'm not technical at all when it comes to computers, but it seems to be working, so we're on to our regularly scheduled program. Today's card is a rather simple card with a fun rainbow star background. When I started off, I was going to add more elements to this card, but I ended up loving the design so much that I just skipped adding anything else to it. I'm really excited to share this card with you, so let's get into the video. To start off, I created a mask using some 4-inch mint tape. I cut a piece just a bit longer than my panel so that it would not only act as a mask, but also hold the panel down as I worked on it. I then went ahead and tore a piece out of the center, creating an elongated opening. Once I liked the shape of the opening, I placed the tape over my panel. Now to get to the center, I had to rip through the bottom, so I made sure to close that rip and put a little bit more tape over it so to keep out any ink from seeping into that rip. For my ink blending, I chose to use some dyes from Pinkfresh Studio. I used the colors Raspberry Bliss, Sunshine, Aquamarine, and Seaside. I usually use Distress Oxides to create ink blended backgrounds, but I wanted these colors to be a little bit brighter. Distress Oxides tend to be muted when it comes to their finished look. Dye inks just have that little extra pop, but they can be a little tricky to use. The key is to have a little bit of patience and build up the color gradually by blending off to the side and then moving onto your project surface. By doing this, you'll avoid harsh brush strokes, which you won't have to work so hard to blend out later on. Now, if you're new to card making or any paper crafting that uses stamping, you don't have to own every color under the sun to have a range of colors. It's nice to have a complete set of inks, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessary. Going back to those elementary school art lessons and learning about primary colors and secondary colors really comes in handy. Just by having red, yellow, and blue, you can create a rainbow, and that can be a little bit easier on the wallet. Once I'd finished ink blending, I added some splatter to the panel using some of Picket Fence's paper splatter watercolors in the liquid gold and white snowflake colors. I find that the paint is a bit thick, so I water it down a little before applying it. However, there are those that use it directly as is. It's just a preference thing. I used an old fan brush, I think this one is actually from the Dollar Tree too, and gave the panel a nice sprinkle. Before changing colors, I rinsed the brush and then applied the second color. If you have perfect pearl powder, you can use that instead to get the same effect. Now there are a bunch of things I love in crafting, but pulling back masking tape and revealing the crisp lines behind it is just so satisfying. You may notice that I overblended on the very edges of my card panel, which is fine because I was going to cut this panel down anyway. However, if you intend to use the whole panel, just be mindful of the edges. Next, I took a Dollar Tree star background stencil and placed it over my ink blended panel. I like to call this selective stenciling because I mask off portions of the stencil and just pick the pattern I want to include in my background. I used mint tape again to mask off the unwanted stars. You could use any mask for this really. Once I liked what I saw, I applied some opaque matte Ranger texture paste mixed in with some white glitter over the pattern. I smoothed out the paste over the stencil using a plastic palette knife. You don't have to put a very thick layer to get a nice result. Even a thin layer will leave a nice raised pattern on your background. This paste dries fairly quickly, perhaps not as quickly as Solar Paste or Picket Fence's paper glaze, but quick enough to handle the project after a few minutes, especially if you apply a thin layer. I removed the stencil and then set the panel aside to dry for a minute. Make sure to clean your stencil immediately, or put it in some water to come back to it later. I trimmed down the panel by 1/4 inch all around, removing the over-blended edges. I also trimmed a piece of black cardstock slightly larger than the ink blended panel to add as a matte border around the card front. This Dollar Tree decorative cardstock has a white core, which you can see from the side. Using a marker, I covered the core by running the marker along the edge of the cardstock. This isn't necessary, but this gives the card a more finished, refined look. I glued the ink blended panel to the black panel using liquid glue. Now, as I mentioned, I had intended to add something to the front of this panel, but when I saw how it looked, I really liked it as it was. You could keep going and add some fun stamps or stickers, but cards don't need to be overcomplicated to be beautiful. At least I thought that with this card. For the sentiment, I didn't know which phrase I'd use. My birthday was earlier this month, so I was inspired to make this a birthday card. I placed a few different stamps into my stamping platform and stamped them in clear embossing ink on a black piece of cardstock. Then I sprinkled white embossing powder over the wet ink and heat set it with my heat tool. Next, I trimmed all the greetings and I finally settled on the simple "Celebrate" for the front of the card. I attached the panel to a white card base using some 1mm black foam squares and glue. I fixed the edge of the sentiment with a marker as I had done with the matte panel before, and then using the same black foam squares, I attached the greeting to the front of the card. A T-square really helped me align everything straight. Lastly, I added some iridescent drops to the front of the card for that extra sparkle. And that's it for this card. I love how this card came out. While I meant it to be a birthday card, you could use it for any happy occasion calling for a celebration. You could even add some subtext to customize the card even further. I can think of a few nice ways to use this card. The end of the school year is quickly coming, and it would make a fantastic graduation card, or even an encouragement card for that teacher that can't wait for the summer. Another idea is to adjust the colors to a red, white, and blue theme, which would make a wonderful card for those of you with loved ones in the service. Overall, it's just a simple design with lots of possibilities. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you dropping by for some crafting fun. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did sharing it with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, please leave me those comments below. Now that I'm back online, I'll be slowly getting back to all of you who were so nice to leave me some love. I hope you'll join me next time for another project. Until then, have a wonderful week, and I hope life treats you kindly. Take care. Bye!